Thank you, Raj. And I have to finish this assignment in 10 minutes, so I have written my assignment. Dear friends, I am very glad to be in front of you to discuss the challenge that lies ahead in completing Dr. Ambedkar's project of creating the society. For someone who has been for several years a part of nationwide social movement to annihilate the caste, I consider it my honor that I have been asked to talk with you on the challenges which lie in the path of annihilating the caste. Since yesterday, we have been discussing the unfinished legacy of Dr. Ambedkar from different perspectives: political, social, economic, and philosophical. We have also discussed how Dr. Ambedkar's ideas resonate with the ideas of many great thinkers in the world, whose main concern was to create the society by ending structural oppression. My concern, and I am talking purely from operational perspective. And why I am talking from purely operational perspective, I would like to quote Dr. Ambedkar in the section 20 of Annihilation, where Dr. Ambedkar says, "There is no doubt, in my opinion, that unless you change the social order, you can achieve little by way of progress. You cannot mobilize the community either for defense or offense. You cannot build anything on the foundation of the caste. You cannot build a nation. You cannot build a morality. Anything that you build on the foundation of the caste will crack, and you will live, and it will never be a whole. The only question that remains to be considered is how, and I underline this, how to bring the reforms of the Hindu social order, how to abolish the caste, and this is the question of supreme importance, and this is the question that is troubling to the social movements in India. How do we do this? The question is not of why, the question is not of what, the question is of how. So my concern, which I am talking purely from operational perspective, is how do we build a strong and sustainable social movement to end oppression by annihilating the caste? I see this as the biggest challenge in ending the oppression in general and ending and annihilating the caste in particular. As you know, Dr. Ambedkar said in Annihilation of the caste is a notion of mind. And removing deep-rooted notions sanctified by religion is a very difficult task. There can be multiple ways in which such notions can be changed. We have discussed few yesterday. Family, education system, state, social movement are some of the agencies which can play a role in removing such notions. However, what we experience in India is that the family is under the deep influence of societal forces. And it is very difficult for the family to promote those values which are at contrast with the societal values. Given this, the notion of caste still survives in the families, and the endogamy is the biggest mechanism through which the families are preserving the caste, not annihilating. Other two agencies, the state and education system, and to which the philosopher to my left and to my right will look at the state and the education system with a great hope that the state and education system will play a great role in ending and healing the caste. Yes, we got some relief from the state which is controlled by the ruling class which is the beneficiary of the state caste-based operation. Education system did allow the microscopic minority from among the victims of the caste to reach here to this level, and this is no lesser than the miracle that those who even were not allowed to touch the blackboard are talking in front of this August gathering in American universities. But our experience has been that the state and education system has not played its role in annihilating the caste. Instead, occasionally, it has sided with the caste. We have reached here not because of the state and education, but despite it. And whatever we gain is due to sheer force of egalitarian constitution drafted by our savior Dr. Ambedkar. As you know, in India there are two worldviews. One worldview propagated by the constitution, another the Brahminical worldview which controls the society. And that struggle, it is out of that struggle something comes out. Therefore, the only way to change the notion of the caste is through social movement. And as you know, the another advantage of the social movement is it not only influences the families, but it also puts the state and education system under check. And therefore, the first biggest challenge I see in annihilating the caste is how do we build a strong, sustainable, and pan-Indian social movement. This is the first challenge. The second, every social movement has its ideological underpinnings, and anti-caste social movement is not an exception. What Dr. Ambedkar indicates us in Annihilation of Caste is that such social movement has to be non-Brahminical, non-Marxist, and non-Gandhian. In its ideological foundation, because these ideologies either have contributed to the defense of the caste or they have created the caste. Brahminism has created the caste, or at best have turned their attention, away from the caste, away from the monster of the caste which Dr. Ambedkar refers. The corollary of this assessment of Dr. Ambedkar is that we need an alternative ideology to build the social movement. Dr. Ambedkar himself, during his 20 years of the work after writing Annihilation of the Caste, has laid the ideological foundation of anti-caste social movement. Not only that, he also introduced us to Buddha, Phule and Kabir. Some of you might have read about them, who fought against the caste-based oppression and whose ideas inspired Dr. Ambedkar. We also learned, while reading Dr. Ambedkar, we also learned about other strong social movements, anti-caste social movement, especially of Ayadhas, Periyar, Narayana Guru, Ravidas and Birsa Munda, who provide ideological inspirations to the anti-caste movement. Thus, we find that there is an alternative tradition, the tradition of ideologies from Buddha to Ambedkar, which not only were the deeply anti-caste but also laid the vision for just an equitable society. My friends in America can refer Gail Umbert's book, a beautiful book compilation of that, all these traditions, seeking Begum Pura, the social vision of anti-caste intellectuals. Thus, in my view, our next challenge is how do you bring these ideologies together and how do we create common ideological foundations for the social movement? The third point is, as you know, the oppression is sustained because oppressors are strong and oppressed are weak. And at least that is the general perception. The one method which oppressors used to keep the oppressed weak is to divide them. In India also this has happened. Dr. Ambedkar in Annihilation of Caste tells us, caste is a device designed to divide. And I repeat because many of the followers of Dr. Ambedkar's followers also, they do not understand this point, that caste is a device designed to divide. We understand that the caste was used as a device to divide the majority, which is around 85% of the Indian population, so that the minority could rule over the majority. This historical divide, operationalized through the caste-based hierarchy, which Dr. Ambedkar calls as graded inequality, has killed the spirit of solidarity in the Indian society. Thus, the project of Annihilation of Caste has an important challenge in failing this design, making this divisive device of the caste unworthy of use, which means that all the oppressed, that is all the victims of the caste, must come together if they want the problem of caste to be permanently solved. Operationally speaking, we have in India, among the victims of the caste, we have scheduled castes who are ex-untouchables, we have scheduled tribes who are Adivasis, we have OBCs who are ex-Shudras, who need to join hands in this project of annihilating the caste. Besides these Hindus, we have religious minorities, Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, who are suffering from the caste. And though their condition is better from their Hindu counterparts, at least in religious domain. Then we have Buddhists, most of whom who are ex-untouchables and who followed the path of Dr. Ambedkar when he left Hinduism and converted to Buddhism, to escape the caste and to also propagate the message of Buddha about just society. All these population groups, all the victims of the caste, and one of my friend was asking who are the allies. These are the natural allies, what we call in Indian society. 85% of the Indian population, around 1,000 billion population. They need to come together, and bringing them together in a critical mass as early as possible is the third biggest challenge that we see in the social movement. My fourth point, Dr. Ambedkar tells us that caste has survived because it has a sacred basis in Hinduism, and therefore he advises his audience in Annihilation of the Caste that if you want to annihilate the caste, you must discard, and I quote, you must discard the authority of the Shastras, destroy the religion of the Shastras, unquote. At present, almost 80 years after Dr. Ambedkar wrote this Annihilation of Caste, we cannot say with certainty that this paradigm shift in the way Hinduism is constructed and the way it is practiced will come from inside or whether it will come from outside. Whether it will come from outside, an outside force will be the reaction because of the mass exodus of those victims of the caste who are escaping Hinduism. We who work in a social movement, we see the greater possibility of that outside force, and we also see it as a far better way to annihilate the caste. By now you might have realized that these challenges are daunting, and I have not mentioned two more challenges. The challenge posed by the deadly nexus of the Brahminism with the capitalism, and the challenge posed by deadly nexus by Brahminism with the patriarchy. The challenges are daunting, but there is no alternative. We don't see any alternative. These are the fundamentals of the movement which we must build upon. The question is, who will initiate, who will take initiative to overcome the challenges? Who will provide leadership to the project of annihilating the caste? In Annihilation of the Caste, Dr. Ambedkar tells us, he tells the solution also. And I quote, entire destiny of the country depends upon its intellectual class. If the intellectual class is honest, if it is independent, disinterested, it can be trusted to take the initiative and give a proper lead. Just 3 years before his death in 1953 in Agra, Dr. Ambedkar, he broke down in a public meeting and he said, this educated class whom I had created had cheated me. So our biggest challenge, the most difficult challenge I see is how early this intellectual class, which is the product and beneficiary of Dr. Ambedkar's great struggle and sacrifice of Dr. Ambedkar, will realize his historical responsibility and fulfill Dr. Ambedkar's expectations. Thank you for patiently listening to me. I invite my friends from India and throughout the world who are fighting against the oppression to join us in the struggle to create the just society. As Dr. Martin Luther King has said, injustice anywhere is threat to justice everywhere. Let us join hands to end the injustice everywhere. Thank you, Jai Hind.
And this is a dialogue. On some level, you're thinking about what I'm saying, and you can respond to it in different ways. And because I was told not to bring any pictures, because we were supposed to originally be in a room without a picture, I didn't bring any pictures, but Torah demanded I bring Savi into the room. I have at home with me a most spectacular collection of Dalit art. art by Dalits. Sami Savarkar is the center of that collection, but there are other ones too, and we're going to show it here at Brandeis in the near future. So you have something to look forward to. The Dalit is the gentleman on the left in that picture. That's a tiny little section of a giant print that Sami sent us for a conference we did in Iowa and Wisconsin. And I'm not going to talk about it much. I'm going to talk more about these people. And my view of the future, my putting us toward the future, I'm not going to talk about exactly where we're going so much as how we're going to get there. And I'm going to only say a few words about that, but I'm going to answer some of the questions that came up during the discussions that I think are worth clarifying a little bit. That might help you on some definitions and give you some other things to talk about. I come from Western Mass, where Sojourner Truth lived for 13 years in Florence. And she began many of her talks by saying, I've come to tell you just what time of night it is. So that's what I'm going to do to begin with. To get an image of what it's like in India for Dalits. Most Dalits are not college professors like the few people I really know. They live in the countryside. They're the rural, landless, most impoverished. But what brings them to our minds most clearly is their identity with African Americans, not just because Phule and later Ambedkar and the Dalit Panthers recognized it. Indians have seen it for a long time, but they're really in many interesting ways, not just at the bottom of the social hierarchy, but seen, well, villainized, or as somebody said a moment ago, criminalized, turned in by the elite, turned into the enemy of the social system, as if that was what they were. And that fits Dalits, it fits African Americans, it also fits the Jews of Western Europe in Christian world. Less so the last 200 years, and maybe the fact that in the last 200 years Jews have reached another situation indicates to us that 2,000 years of Dalits in India may have a possible solution, although what happened at the middle of the 20th century suggests you can start emerging from that situation and still be vulnerable to horrible things. It's an interesting set of things. Okay, so I'm going to go over some specifics. This is Bant Singh. He is a Dalit in Punjab who actually went to the police, and as someone said up here, it's dangerous to go to the police in India if you're a Dalit. Went to the police because his daughter was raped. He kept going back and kept going back until they actually prosecuted and put the people who raped his daughter in jail. In the end, he was beaten so severely that he lost 3 of his limbs. He was also a communist poet and singer, and you can't kill my voice. Right? He's a man who went on to keep protesting. Dalits have been rising up, Dalits have been resisting right along. And they do on lots of levels. That's the photographer, Ranveer Singh, who took those pictures, and he's an active photojournalist. There are lots of people there doing lots of things. We haven't heard enough about them, and we need to learn more about them. But there's a Dalit artist there too. Okay, I'm going to stop the pictures with that. Someone asked earlier if there was any, and this is probably a good point about, yes, the biggest thing we face, I think, as far as changing India is the fact that, thank you, Hinduism itself is so dependent upon, so wrapped around the caste system. But the fact is, the Bhakti movements, right across from at least the 15th century, maybe earlier, Bhakti movements have been anti-caste. So there's a Hindu movement that's been anti-caste. Coming up closer to the present, Kanchilaya, Kancha, who wrote the best-selling book, Why I Am Not a Hindu. His whole point being that Shudras, which is to say most Hindus, worship a different set of gods in a different set of ways than the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, the Dvija, or in fact, as they say, the Aryan castes. And because they worship a different set of gods, they can do it in a different way. And if they can do that different, lots of differences can take place. When we talk a lot, as philosophers tend to, quoting specific people, Gandhi said this, Gandhi said that, what did it mean? I think we always have to remember the philosophical idea of praxis. Praxis. The words mean nothing unless you add them to the practice that goes with it. So what's important is what Gandhi was doing while what he was saying it. And that goes for reading Christian theology or comparing Islam and Christianity. Praxis, you have to have the words, you have to have the outcomes as well as the words. Always think of them both together. Just comparing words doesn't, well, in fact, if you look at the Old Testament and the New Testament, those are horrifying people. I mean, rape and murder was the center of what was, that deity was providing for them. So, there you go. Tribe, caste, American view of our colloquial use of the word race, those are all three social constructions about identity by birth. They're all pseudo-races, all three, no question. Class, you can move among classes. Not very well, it turns out, but you have the possibility. Well, among those three things, you can't change your tribe or caste or pseudo-race. How do white supremacists change? Well, I think among the people sitting in this room, there are lots of people who are not white supremacists, or they're white, right? Or they're Jews. They're people who grew up looking at television and the civil rights movement and Paulo Freire and Indians and Ambedkar and Torat and Darity and other people saying to themselves, you know, I'd rather be like this than like that, right? I think probably most of the people in this room that are still sitting here, that's how they got here. They have choices. We can do this. We just need more people doing it. I've been doing it all my life. So have a lot of people in this room. And that, in fact, is how it's going to change. You want to know how it's going to change? That is how. More and more people deciding, I'd rather do this than that. I've got some of my best friends are Brahmins. At least 3 of them. I mean, really wonderful. And 2 of them, one of them I have no idea. He was pretty much a liberal guy. But the other 2 have worked and work in their lives anti-caste. They were born Brahmin, but they do not see themselves as Brahmins in the caste sense. It's not their fault what family they were born into, and they don't want to embarrass their parents by yelling, I hate Brahmins. But unlike Bharati Mukherjee, the novelist, they would never say, I'm not ashamed of being a Brahmin. They're certainly ashamed of that tradition. In South Africa, we all know about apartheid. The British, the real imperialists there, the British fought with the Dutch, who brought in the apartheid that made the racial situation worse. Some of those British just thought you could be more effective without the apartheid, and the Dutch eventually agreed with them and they let Mandela out and they moved ahead. But again, some of them moved on from the apartheid, from the worst levels of that kind of oppression, toward where we are, which is that people can always move. Don't think of the change as being a coup, where all of a sudden someone gets up, yells mea culpa, and joins the other team. We're talking about a process that's going to take generations no matter what we do. And that's what disappoints some people. They can't just do it. You know, Dr. King's movement stopped dead the minute he left the South and came north. Northerners were happy to send him money to stay in Memphis, but the minute he moved to Chicago, that was it. So we have a long way to go in our society. America isn't a lot different than India in a lot of these ways. We're ahead of India. We've moved further along. The atrocity, the Indian equivalent of our lynching, still goes on. If you send me your email, if you send me an email, you can get my address from there. If you send me an email, I'll send you the address of a site that'll tell you daily what the top 10 Indian English language newspapers carry as far as atrocities against Dalits. Rapes and murders every single day. And that's just the ones that get reported. So it's really a desperate situation we're talking about. And that's almost enough, but I do need to do one more thing, and I'm up here and I've got the microphone. What is the biggest answer? Ambedkar stands for something else in India we haven't talked about enough, but he's been mentioned. Ambedkar, more than any other Indian, means democracy. And in fact, that was his gift. India, you notice, is a secular state, unlike Pakistan, which is in even worse shape. You know, India, he is the most important person behind democracy, and as his Buddha or Marx lecture. In the end, Marxism won't work, not the Marxism of the communists of the Soviet Union, who did it by force. You can't do it that way. We need revolution, which is a slow social change process, not a revolt and a coup only. All right, so democracy is what he proposes the way to get out of it, and how we all figure that out together is what we all have to do.
First of all, I would like to thank the university, Professor Simon, Professor Sampath for having me here, giving me this opportunity to share some of the work which I've been doing. And I'm going to be very technical with some numbers, etc. So please excuse that. Because I have 10 minutes, I'm going to run through certain stuff. And so basically, this presentation is based on a study which I am doing at the National Council of Applied Economic Research in Delhi. And it's based on a survey which is a panel data set, one of its kinds. It's the largest panel data set in the country with 41,000 households sampled. And in this survey, we asked two questions. I think the first time these questions were ever asked. The primary respondent of the household was asked this question: do any members of your household practice untouchability, seeking a yes or no response? In case the response was no, we asked an additional question: would there be a problem if someone who's the scheduled caste were to enter your kitchen or share your utensils? Problem? Yes or no? I won't go into our hypothesis, I'll just share the results. So, in response to the first question, 20% of our entire sample household said that yes, some member in their household practices untouchability. But at the same time, 80% denied that. And it's very likely that many of them were trying to hide their prejudice, and it's an underestimate. But to these 80%, we asked another question: would there be a problem if someone who's a scheduled caste were to enter your kitchen or share utensils? And 9% said yes, it would be a problem. We're not going to let them in or share our utensils. So combined results for India are 27% people have no problem accepting that they practice untouchability, 30% in rural areas and 20% in urban areas. And I think this is quite an underestimate. It could be easily 40 or 50. And this is the first time we are shifting the focus from the Dalits, the victims, to the perpetrators. So who are these guys who are practicing untouchability? So if you break up the households by their social group, their social identity, and within each community we see how many people said yes to practicing, we find that nearly more than half of the Brahmins said yes, we practice untouchability. But the surprising results are for OBC, SC and ST. You would wonder why are they practicing untouchability. We have a couple of theories, and this is where probably the discussion would lead us towards the future, etc. 15% of the SC households say they practice untouchability. That could be because, within the subcaste, the higher caste are practicing untouchability against the lower caste. The other possibility is that because the onus of the practice lies on the Dalits, don't enter the temple, don't draw water, don't walk here. So if you ask them, do you practice untouchability? They would say, of course we practice untouchability. And that is indeed what we find out, that more of the responses to the first question are higher than the second question. And I'm not going to go into that, but I can share the results with you. And tribals, well, this is another interesting question which came up. So they are out of the Hindu fold, they own land, and obviously they also want to, they probably, it's a mindset that you need someone below you to discriminate. So they clearly practice untouchability as well. This is a map of the spread of the practice. This is at district level. This is all the districts where we did the survey. So you can clearly see that the incidences are concentrated and the practice is much higher in the northern, central part of India. Even the hill regions, Himachal Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, you have UP, MP, Jharkhand, Bihar, all there. And the practice seems to go down as we go down. Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, etc. And also the northeastern states, which are the tribal states, who are mostly Christians. So that's the spread. We did some econometric exercises, etc., etc. And what we found is that rural residents, households who are living in rural areas, are 24% less likely to practice untouchability. So the migration issue and rural spaces obviously forcing people to work and live together and forcing them to change their mindset, I think. Education, any education above 10 standard seems to reduce the practice, and it goes on till graduation. The odds or the likelihood or the desire to practice untouchability goes down as your level of education of any member in the household increases. But beyond graduation, we see a change in the trend. So it could be that the smarter you are, you realize you're very curious, you're very conscious of the advantages of caste. So as you get more education, it tends to reinforce the effect. But that's part of another paper. So the important result which we found was that households who have more contacts or social networks outside their community are less likely to practice untouchability as compared to households who have more contacts or networks within their own community. So this was the major result. Amongst various occupation types of households, salaried professionals, agriculture wage workers, non-agriculture wage workers, farmers and others, the cultivators, the people who own land, are most likely to practice untouchability. You have the feudal systems going on, and as most of the laborers are either tribals or Dalit because they don't own land or don't have education, I think that feudal relationship is getting overlaid by caste relationships. And income doesn't make any difference. You may be rich, but you're equally likely to practice untouchability unless that is accompanied by rise in education or you're living in an urban setting. So these are some of the results, and I think we can take this forward in discussions. Thank you.